Man, who can say praise God? Man, who can you trust? Can you trust him? You know, this morning as we kick off a new series, and I think you know what we're going to be talking about for the next couple of weeks, I want us just for a moment, because nobody's going to ask you in this room, and those watching online, I doubt anybody's going to ask you, but how many of you could be honest enough to say, man, I've got some trust issues? We've got some incredible people in this place. Everybody online, we're going to post the other people up their information. You can call them this week and they can give you all kinds of hope. But no, seriously, if you think about it, along the way, somewhere along the lines, somebody has betrayed you. Somebody's hurt you. So your trust has been broken. And so my question today is, who do you trust? Where can you find your trust? How do we rebuild our trust? You know, a few weeks ago, I sat with the staff, and it was the week following our student camp and our children's camp, and I asked Pastor Cody, I said, Cody, what was God doing at camp? Because I was really listening to try to discern with clarity where God's moving and as far as the direction for our teaching. Then I asked Miss Kim, I said, what was God saying in the children's camp? And because both groups experienced just the move of God. And then at large, we just talked as the staff, because I really feel like that where the word that, and we've not talked about this word a lot, but back at the beginning of the year, God kind of put this word in my heart for 2022, and it was the word persevere. Knowing that there's going to be assaults and there's going to be different things going on in the world, and many of us will face it. We're not exempt from it, but that you and I must persevere, and there's a way to persevere. And so as we were laying out where we really see God at work in the teaching for the upcoming months, it was so clear that though I had originally was going to talk about something different this week, it was evident that God wanted us to talk about this. So I want to ask one more time, when you're dealing with trust, what is it that how do you rely? Where do you go? What do you do? Because I think looking around, if you listen, if you look at statistics, over the last few weeks, or last few years actually, man, relationships have been, they've been severed. Matter of fact, there's been many times that I've had somebody say to me, Pastor, you know, I had a relationship and they betrayed me. They walked away from me. There was a time in our ministry in the earlier days that my wife and I, we just thought, wow, every Christian in the world is perfect and they're godly and they're going to tell you everything that you want. I didn't realize that Christians could be mean, and sometimes I've been that mean Christian. But how many of you know what it's like to have a close relationship and it seems that they've walked away? And so in the midst of this, and in the midst of the last few years where there's been a lot of conflict and a lot of broken pieces, you know, we come to this place to say, there's so many people that are suspicious. There's so many people that have been hurt, so many people that are pretty raw. So can we, or how can I ever trust again? So this morning, if you've got a Bible, I want you to go with me to the New Testament. And there's two passages that I'm going to be talking out of today. And the first one is found in John chapter 2. And then I want you to make your way over and just kind of put something there to kind of mark it to the Gospel of Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. So the title of this series is Who's Got Trust Issues? And I don't know that anybody's been exempt from it. I think we've all dealt with it to some degree. It doesn't mean that everybody's walked wounded and defeated, not at all. But I do know this, there's a voice that's going to be constantly speaking negativity. And I tell you, I was so blessed, so blessed this morning. One of our tenders in our first service shared with me something that's recently happened to them. And I told her, I said, there's some way we need to expose what's going on, some of the scams that's happening to our church, because there's many people are falling victim. You know, I get emails, you get emails all the time, and it may be to update, or you've just been billed, you know, however much money for this software update. And there's so many scams. And I know of 3 people from our fellowship that's connected, people that are watching either in person or online today, that in recent days, there has been a phone call that you thought was true. Matter of fact, last year, many of you received an email from me that stated, I've got a situation and I wonder, would you be available to talk to me after a while? I'm about to go into a meeting. And it was a scam. Basically, the follow-up was going to be, I need money and I'm embarrassed, so please send money. So I hope y'all didn't send any money, because I didn't get it if you did. And a lot of that's happened. But recently, a church member says, I was on the phone with my banker, and my banker was telling me that I'd just been hacked through a purchase on Amazon, and I need to verify some stuff. And so this lady's telling me she verified, and she said, as soon as I got off the phone, something wasn't right in my spirit. I immediately called my bank to find out it was not my banker. And while the banker right then, this was a couple of months back, has her account pulls up, all of a sudden the hits just start right there. And so he froze everything. Unfortunately, in recent days, this has happened again, and it was very, very substantial. This person that had done the cyber attack made it look so real that they went in and took control of their computer, thought they were talking to the banker, and it was devastating. So you talk about trust issues. How many knows that whether it's from a financial or maybe it's from a best friend, man, there are things that's happened over the last few years with the pandemic and a lot of things that we question everything. And we ought to question. But I think that because of a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, especially through the pandemic, that we've been isolated and we've been separated. We're skeptical. We question and really we question institutions. We question friendships. We question churches. We question government. But this week in doing research, I found something interesting. A Duke University graduate recently did research and found that they polled a lot of people in America and found out that 73, I believe it's 70-some% of what we see and hear from media, whether it's social media or other forms of media, is manipulated by a very small percentage of people. In other words, they took this poll to say, how many of you feel like you're more trusting today than you were before the pandemic? And so you had like 3% that says, I don't trust. Another 3%, I trust more than I've ever trusted. But what they found was in this survey that it narrowed it down that about 3 to 6% of the people that when we're reading most of the stuff on media, it's being manipulated by 3 to 6% of the people who are isolated and disconnected from other people and from society. What does that mean? That through the algorithms and through a lot of stuff, the enemy's doing a pretty good job in sending a lot of messages to cause people to not to trust, not to hang out, not to build relationships, not to go outside in public anymore. I'm afraid I'll get sick, or I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt. And so it leaves people really paranoid. And so my question is, with trust issues, can I ever trust again? So I want you to look with me in the Gospel of John. And here in chapter 2, I want to kind of set the stage for what we're going to read this morning. If you'll recall, there's 4 Gospels in the New Testament. It's Matthew's account, Mark's account, Luke's account, and John's. And they're all writing the story of Jesus and the whole kingdom life and the whole, basically they're given the account of Christ and the movement of Jesus. But they're writing from different perspectives. And John is the one that's writing not only about Jesus' humanity, but about his deity. And so if you think about it, in the very, very beginning, chapter 1, John is writing the Christmas story, and it looks so different than Luke's Christmas story. Matter of fact, Luke talks about a manger, animals, shepherds, and baby Jesus there in this barn. John is writing from the aspect, his Christmas story starts like, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word dwelt among us. And he's writing, and it's just like, bam. I mean, it's just right there at you. Go to chapter 2, and it opens with the first miracle of Jesus performing the miracle at the wedding where he turns water into wine. But a little bit later in this chapter, in chapter 2, is where we find this text. And I want you to see what the Son of God writes. I mean, Jesus that was in the beginning, here's what he writes, verse number 23. And I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It says, because of the miraculous signs Jesus did in Jerusalem at the Passover celebration, many began to trust him. Now, let's look at that. Many began to trust in Jesus. Why? Man, they had seen what he had been doing. They had saw signs and wonders, the miraculous, and so they trusted in him. But Jesus didn't trust them because he knew human nature. I don't know if this looks odd to you, but normally, as most of us are going to be reading the gospel, especially here in chapter 2, we're thinking about what's just happened and then going into chapter 3, and he's going to go into the wilderness, and we're going to see just the ministry unfold. We miss what happens. It says that they begin to trust him because of what they saw. But Jesus didn't trust them because of what he knew about human nature. Now, I want to, before you misunderstand what scriptures are saying, he didn't say he did not trust Daryl, he didn't trust Al, he didn't trust Rhonda, he didn't trust Linda, but he didn't trust them because he knew human nature. Now, what is human nature? The nature of sin. So he knew the nature of these people. So no one needed to tell him what mankind is really like. So how many would agree? Jesus is the Son of God and he knows everything. So he didn't need to know more information about these people. Why? Because he made them. Here's what the Message translation says. But Jesus didn't entrust his life to them, for he knew them inside and out. He knew how untrustworthy that they really were, and he didn't need any help in seeing right through them. So think about it. Jesus has created all people, but yet he knows them. Now, have you ever thought about whether Jesus had any trust issues or not? For me personally, until I started studying this, I did not know. And let me give you a little background. It's why I felt so led to this series is because, you know, some say we're living in the last days. I say I don't really know, but we're closer than we were last week. And so I just believe in the latter days, things are going to get challenging and difficult. And there's going to be brothers and sisters that's going to turn against each other. There's going to be churches. There's just going to be a lot of divisiveness and strife over lack of trust. But when we look at this, and I think about Jesus, he knew these people. So think about Judas, for an example. Jesus at the Last Supper, as they were celebrating Passover, he said to the disciples, one of the men at this table is going to betray me this very night. You're gonna oppose me tonight. And everybody's looking around like, who could this be? Well, he's talking about Judas. So think, here's a guy that's walked with Jesus a number of years. And so did Jesus know what he was gonna do? He sure did. But Judas sold him out. Guess that we talked about tithing last week. Have you ever thought about the fact that the people that paid Judas, they took the money from the tithes at the temple to pay Judas for ratting Jesus out, so to speak, selling him out. So Jesus knew this about Judas. But you look a little bit closer and you have Peter that Peter denies Jesus. Jesus knew that, but yet, and here's our hope today, though we sometimes write people off because of a lack of trust, Man, Jesus didn't write off Peter. Peter met with Jesus, and there was this building of trust back. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk next week about trusting other people. And then our third week, we're going to be talking about trusting God. But today, it's really, our focus is more about trusting ourselves. Can I trust me? Talk to the lady that thought she was talking to her banker. She's tempted to say, man, I can't trust myself. Talk to men that's made some poor judgment calls in their life. That said, man, I don't trust myself, and I'm not going to set myself up for failure to do certain things or to be around certain people. But when we think about trust issues, trust issues can do one of two things or many things. One, it can isolate us, or it can cause the opposite. Let me ask you, how many of you have ever lost a relationship, but you took another chance and you're grateful that you did? That though somebody had hurt you, you took the risk and you established a friendship. Maybe it was a marriage relationship that you was able to enter into. Or maybe it's just a friend to friend. I remember hearing a pastor one time tell me, he says, I will never, ever, ever trust anybody again. Never. And I was about to give him a little miniature sermonette, and then he pointed right at me. He says, even you. I'm thinking, dude, I led you to Jesus. What have I done to you? And guess what? I just thought, oh man, he just needs a good holy slap upside the head. But guess what? I don't know what landed him there, but I found that spirit trying to get on me. How many knows there are bitter spirits who will try to eat your lunch? That bitterness, I'm telling you, and you don't have to go too far. I mean, it's normally the people closest to us. Now, I'm not trying to create something that's not true. But here's a statement I've stood by many, many years. If the devil can't defeat you, he will defeat someone else whose defeat will defeat you. In other words, you having a good day and your wife's not having a good day, guess what? The devil wants to use your spouse to cause you to have a bad day. Don't blame your spouse, by the way. Then you're going to have a bad day. But I think about how, man, the enemy is looking for that opportunity to isolate us. That's what's been so difficult in the last few years. And in fact, you look at how good life was a year ago, 2 years ago. Matter of fact, I want to encourage you, just stop posting about what the price of gas was 2 years ago. It ain't going to help you feel any better, because if you're going to still drive your car, you're still going to have to pay the price. But how many knows there's somebody lying to us? Recently, and I gotta confess this, I'm still young and I still feel like I got stamina and I can stomp somebody on a good day in a nice way. But I'm not near as young, and I don't have all that I think I have. And so one of the things that I've come to realize is that the older we get, and you don't even have to be old to know this, but certain things like technology, it's like, what is this message? The other day, I had been getting these reminders that my iCloud storage was full, so I need to pay another $10 a month so I can enlarge, so I can save more stuff. And I kept thinking about it, and then finally it says, your computer's no longer saving any information. So I asked one of my kids, I says, hey, before I buy this, tell me, what does this mean? I won't tell you which kid. It's the oldest that makes me feel really dumb. It says, just delete the stuff that you don't need in your phone. I'm thinking, I need everything. And he says, when's the last time you deleted all the extra backups on your phone? I'm like, I've not done any of that stuff. So I didn't want to admit that I didn't know where to find this stuff. And he tells me how to get there. And guess what? He says, oh, how many backups are you right now currently holding in your phone? I says, oh, I see one. He says, how many do you really have? I said, 3. Delete and keep the most recent one, and you're good to go. And guess what? When I got rid of all of that unnecessary stuff, I've got plenty of memory. You think I'm just telling a story that has no business in relationship to this message. Hang on. Just like my phone, our minds want to hang on to stuff that is taking up a lot of space. And in fact, it's not Hey, it wasn't bad stuff. I mean, it's emails, it's messages, it's stuff that I think is important. But guess what? The enemy is trying to cause you to think on and meditate on and hold on to stuff. Though it might have happened, the enemy is going to cause you to rehearse it and replay it to where what happened really didn't happen. I had a dear friend that he taught me how to handle guns and prepared me so I could go get some testing done, so to carry a gun and on and on and on. He told me one day, he says, listen, Daryl, he says, no matter how much you think you know, until you're in that moment when the enemy steps into your space, you really don't know how you're going to respond. You think you do. And he said, but I was caught off guard. And he says, and I'm ashamed to say, I didn't respond the way that I'd been trained. And I've trained people, many people for many years. And he says, when I went back and I walked out of the situation, he got through the situation, he says, in my mind, I kept thinking, man, I should have done this. I should have done this. I should have done this. And he went and watched the camera that recorded the whole thing. And he said, it's amazing how deceived we are by what we're seeing, what's going on in real time, but so quickly we're replaying things in our mind, and all of a sudden how we feel, and the adrenaline, the pain, the fear begins to change the story. And he says, if I'd done what I thought I should have done, I'd probably spend the rest of my life in jail because the story didn't go as I thought it went. How many knows that we're holding on to stuff? Now, maybe you've never been in a life-threatening place like that, but you've seen a look, you've heard an accusation, and the enemy has replayed it, and the enemies even give you a play-by-play description of what you've just encountered. And guess what? That look that somebody was looking at you probably had no meaning whatsoever, but the devil does a good job saying, Chuck's got a bad attitude towards you. I can say Chuck because he's big, he's my friend, and he don't have no bad attitude towards anybody. Here's what I'm saying. The enemy what's he want to do? He wants to create things so you don't trust. So Jesus, when you look at Jesus' life, there was this situation to where they trusted him because they saw him. His trust wasn't based on what he's seen everybody doing. Now, I want to talk for just the final minutes about how do I not just trust myself, but how do I trust other people? How am I going to trust God? How am I going to live in such a way that God can use my life to bless my family, to be a blessing to other people? How many knows that the church remains on this planet, this earth, to worship God and to be a witness to the lost world? And how many knows the devil is going to do everything he can to cause your light not to shine and you not care about whether somebody goes to heaven or not? I was blessed this week. I met a young guy. I was buying something from a guy online and met him, and I'm very skeptical, and he's skeptical, and he asked me, he says, hey, if you don't mind, just get in your truck and pull around back. Normally I wouldn't do that, but I was well guarded. And I get out of the truck and everything was fine. And I'm walking back to get in. He said, sir, and he was young. He was in his 20s. He said, sir, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, it has nothing to do with this thing that you bought. But man, do you by chance attend a church anywhere? Man, my antenna was up. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like this. And I looked, I says, yeah, you could say I attend a church from time to time. I can't describe to you how much joy I felt. Because in reality, there's been very few times has anybody ever approached me and asking, do I attend church or do I know Jesus? This guy, his family runs a wrecker service, and he says, man, God is so good. Every day, God puts me and my family in situations to where people are hurting, they're in need. And he said, man, God has just placed us in a mission field. And guess what, church? We all are living in the mission field. But if and again, we don't need to just be vulnerable to everybody coming and going. But here's what I do know. If the devil can keep you separated and on the defense and think everybody's out to get us, we're going to miss the mission that God has called us to. So do you believe in these latter days of Jesus' tears, do you believe there's going to be a greater attack against Christianity? I can help you. Yes, it's going to be. But we don't have to fear it. But here's what we see. And so the scripture that I'm going to read to you is one that we've shared over the years. And in fact, last summer, our elders taught through what our mission and our vision of the church is. And again, I don't give an apology, but I'm not going to talk about the scriptures in the context of, man, this is why we're here as a church, is to love God, love others, and make Him known. But that's the mission. But I want to speak for just a couple of minutes, and Blake's going to come, the band's going to come, but it's more of, for me and for you, how when I've been hurt, and again, I'm not raw all over anybody. I've not been hurt lately or anything like that. So I don't come to the table with a vengeance to try to get back at it. Nobody, nothing like that. But I come because the enemy wants to accuse. The enemy wants to separate and to divide. The enemy wants to isolate. The enemy wants us to trust only in ourselves. But when we trust only in ourselves, what's happening is we're missing out. Matter of fact, we're very limited in what we do alone. Therefore, God has created relationships. And I want you to see this. Jesus is asking Mark 12. Somebody comes and says, hey, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus said to him, the first of all the commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And here's what he says. And again, I don't want you to think about okay, what am I supposed to do? God's going to give you a message, a personal word right here. So, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, with all of your strength. This is the first commandment. And then he says the second's like it, love your neighbor. Now, when I wrote the outline over a week ago, I thought about, it's easy to camp out on what is evident. We've all had trust issues. But I don't want to miss what the key is for us moving forward, okay? Because we need to move forward. God's brought life to us. And so I thought about how biblically, man, if I've been separated, if I've been wounded, if I'm at a distance from God, it starts with my heart. And so as I was researching this passage about trusting, I saw this and it says, man, you're to love the Lord your God with all your heart. So that makes sense, doesn't it? Man, if we're going to be in right relationship with anybody, it starts between us and God, and it starts with the heart. But that was not what God put his finger on. But I want you to see another word, and it's the word, your mind. The most important commandment is that you love the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. Just like my iCloud was just cluttered up, not with bad stuff, but just stuff that was just taking up a lot of space. It's like God was just saying to me in the last couple of days, Daryl, I don't want you totally trusting in you. I want you to trust in me. Matter of fact, wouldn't that be the religious way to answer? Hey, let's all trust God. It is. But I want to show you how to do this. And here's where I want to wrap up. How do we trust God with our mind? In the book of Philippians chapter 4, I want to wrap up here. He says, finally, brother, whatsoever things that are true, that are noble, the things that are just, the things that are pure, the things that are lovely, that are good, of a good report, things that are of virtue, of praiseworthy, think on these things. Let's just start with the first one. Whatever things are true. You know, for me and my encouragement for you as we're going to walk these next couple of weeks together and looking at, do I have any trust issues? I want to encourage you, be willing to confess your faults to God. If you've sinned, confess it to God. And matter of fact, if God forgives you of your sin, which he will, I want to encourage you to find forgiveness for yourself. There's a lot of people that are walking around that claim to be Christians, and probably are, but they're living in bondage because they know religiously, spiritually that God will forgive them, but it's hard to take that from their heart to their mind, or from their mind to their heart to say, but I forgive me. So I want you to bow all over this place. So there's going to be trust issues. There's going to be hurts, but Jesus says, starting place to move forward is to love me. Love me with all your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. Today, with your heads bowed, what God was speaking to me this morning in my quiet time is this just time to quit carrying the baggage that we all hold on to? It's time to quit listening to the airwaves of the enemy being the traffic controller over our minds, and begin to take authority over our minds in Christ Jesus. So how do you move forward as you're sitting there just in an attitude of prayer? It's first by loving God more. Spend some time personally and intimately with God. And we'll deal with this a little bit more in depth next week, but I want you to be thinking about, is there a hurt, a pain? Is there a stronghold? Is there a lie that you've held on to that maybe you just need to forgive and you just need to release it? I want to close with this scripture, and I'm going to read it from the Message because I just love. Man, it's just like Jesus is standing right here and he says, are you tired? Are you worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I hadn't seen that word as strongly as just right now. I believe that we need to learn the unforced rhythms of grace in order to be able to trust. And then he says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Father, I praise you. And I thank you for such a picture from the Gospel of Matthew that, is there anyone weary? Anyone exhausted or tired? You're inviting us today, God, to just get along with you, to learn from you, to discover the grace, the rhythms of grace. And God, I pray that I don't know who it is, where they've been struggling to trust. And the temptation is for us to just trust in ourselves, God. But we know, Lord, there's nothing that we can do, nothing that we can know or understand that will compare to what you see and what you know. So God, I just pray that, God, this morning that you would search our hearts and God began just a freeing and a healing. And God, where there may be somebody that has a trust issue, somebody watching at home, God, today, and thinking, man, it's a great day. The rain's ruined my plans. God, it's just a good reminder that you know where we're going to be and when we're going to be involved. And God, you may use rain to stop us for 45 minutes to learn of the rhythms of your grace. So I pray, God, for the one that needs to come back and press forward, I pray that they would see that you are trustworthy. God, for the one that may be listening, they've never trusted you, I pray, Holy Spirit, draw them, that by faith, they would be willing to give you a try, God. That they would quit trying on their own and quit trying religion, but that they would admit, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I'm still worn out, and I have nothing. God, I pray you'll meet them. So, Father, I pray, be magnified. Speak, draw. For the next few minutes, I want to invite you, whether it's at this altar or wherever you are, just to encounter him. And I want you to stand, and the band's going to lead us in this time. And just pray, God, just be glorified in your name.